Hello and welcome to the Blockade Runner podcast. My name is John, and with me, as always, is Ryan.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ryan. Ryan's feeling a little under the weather, but he's too dedicated to the cause to call in sick to our podcast this morning. So, thanks.
And I called in sick on Thursday.
Oh, did you?
Well, I mean, to the podcast. We're gonna record this on Thursday, but like I had even less of a voice then.
Yeah.
So
no, I was just for some reason I was thinking, not going to work on Thursday since it was negative 30 degrees or something here that day, and school got canceled for me. So, yeah, it was bananas over here in Illinois as far as the weather's concerned.
Polar vortex.
Yeah. Yep.
It's back.
But but it's gonna be in the 40s today. So positively balmy in Blockade Runner headquarters here. So
wow.
No issues. All right, let's jump into the show. We've got some news. We've got some resistance thoughts and actually a voicemail, some listener feedback, which is cool. And then our primary topic, which Ryan's excited to talk about and kind of came up with, is the EA, Electronic Arts, and Star Wars situation, we'll say. So we're going to look at the history of that and kind of our thoughts on the deal there with EA and Star Wars, I think. So that's the plan. And there's not any big news this week, really. Nothing major like I was maybe thinking we would get. No Star Wars show return, which was a real weird thing because it seemed like it was coming back and then it no-showed. They called in sick, I guess, this week. But but there were a couple of tweets over the last week or so that I thought were really interesting in regards to episode 9. And so we've got a tweet from John Boyega, a tweet from Anthony Daniels, and a tweet from Brian Herring. The John Boyega tweet, actually, let's start with the Anthony Daniels tweet. That was from the 28th. And he was tweeting about his last day on episode 9. So Anthony Daniels posted, "Today was 3PO's last day on episode 9. He's so sad, so am I. But we're so proud to have worked with such a lovely, talented cast and crew led by JJ and Kathy. I'll miss everyone, but I'm glad to know that we've been making something exceptional together to share with the waiting world." It's a little bit of a goosebump situation for me reading that tweet. You know what I mean? I read it and I was like, oh, wow, they're almost done with episode 9. And then I read it again and I was like, whoa, like, what if that's the last time Anthony Daniels ever plays C-3PO, It's just really crazy to think about. So, but a little bit of an emotional tweet there, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got one from John Boyega. Somebody asked him, Club Star Wars on Twitter, how much more filming are you doing, John? And out of all 3 productions, what's been the most fun to work on? He says just a little more, ! So I think we're getting close to episode 9 wrapping. And then he says, out of all 3 productions, what's been the most fun to work with? Club Star Wars asked work on. And John Boyega says, this one has been the most fun by far. Yeah. So I think that's exciting, I think it's a sign of good things for episode 9, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you and I were talking last night, Ryan, about like, man, they're still filming. Like, I hope things are going well, or I just hope like it's on track to come out when it's supposed to come out. But a tweet like that, I think, is an indicator that it seems like we haven't heard any like negativity or anything bad, no drama, anything like that coming out from the set. We haven't really heard much of anything, so maybe that's why. But but for John Boyega to say like this one's been the most fun by far to work on, just sounds like people are happy about what's going on there, and it must be going pretty smoothly, I think.
Yeah, and I mean this filming has not had like a like Harrison Ford leg situation at all. So like it's I know like Force Awakens filming like ran long, but that was because there was that issue with Harrison and all that. But like this just seems like they have a lot to film. And I wonder if they're filming extra, filming more than is needed, maybe filming more stuff to even like throw off people on the set, to like what the story is. Like they're just filming a lot, it seems
Yeah.
like, for a long time.
Yeah.
And maybe just have like a lot to work with, um for when they hunker down in the editing chamber.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that could be, and it sounds like from stuff that John Boyega and Kevin Smith have said, is that it sounds like there's some pretty complex or pretty big sequences too. So,
Mm-hmm.
because I always think like, man, they're filming for a long time, and the longer they film, the more I'm thinking like, what's the runtime on this movie going to be? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I really don't want a more than 2.5 hour long Star Wars movie. I think that's about as far as they should go, personally. You know, and it's like, would I want more than 2.5 hours of Star Wars content that I could watch? Yeah, like if it's a 2.5 hour movie and then there's like a straight up hour of deleted scenes on the Blu-ray or something, like sure, I'd be all in for that. But I don't want a 3 hour and 15 minute Star Wars movie or anything like that. I don't think they would do that. I'm confident they won't. Pretty positive. But it's like, oh man, is this movie going to be really long? But then I just think like, well, it could just be the complexity of what they're filming in certain scenes. If it's like giant battle sequences and stuff like that, like maybe that just takes a long time to film in comparison to other stuff, maybe. So, who knows? But anyway, it definitely seems like they're wrapping up. And this last tweet that we wanted to mention is from yesterday, I think. It was from Brian Herring, who is a puppeteer, BB-8 puppeteer, like the lead BB-8 puppeteer, I think. And I believe he's coming to Celebration too. Did they announce that? I thought they did. Okay, well, we'll see. But anyway, today was a wrap on BB-8. The last 5 years have been an amazing ride. Thanks to J.J. Abrams, Kathleen Neal, Team BB-8, especially Dave and the entire cast and crew for the time of my life. Few people get to live the dream. Thank you. And then a couple of hashtags there. With some photos of Rey on the Jakku Desert, and just some fun shots there from the last 5 years of filming Star Wars movies. So
yeah, so he did the Porgs.
Yeah, it looks that way
as well. And what are the creatures on Canto Bight?
The Fathiers?
Yeah, Fathiers. It looks like there's a picture of one of those in there too.
Oh wow. Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, well, BB-8's amazing, and all the puppeteer work on these sequel movies has been incredible.
Yeah.
So that's a Star Wars MVP right there, no doubt. But just hearing that both BB-8 and C-3PO are done, it's like, well, they've got to be pretty darn close to being finished. If especially BB-8. I mean, C-3PO, we haven't seen so much C-3PO in these sequel movies, so but knowing they're done with BB-8, even, I feel like, look, well, I would say we're in the last week. I think, with people, leaving the set and being done and all that sort of thing. I would assume they are essentially done filming. We're maybe a week, 2 at the most, I would think, and they'll be done. So that brings all kinds of good things with it. If they finish filming, I think we'll get a press release or maybe even a little video. We got that really cool video when Episode 8 started filming. The video of them on Octo, and it's like, oh, today is officially the first day of Episode 8 filming, or yesterday was. It'd be really great to get some kind of video like that announcing we're done. This was the end, and just like 30 seconds of behind the scenes shots, like nothing meaty, nothing like necessarily being like, revealing any content at all, but just to see some videos of actors smiling and laughing on set.
I just want to see Oscar Isaac horsing around. Like, just give me that, and I'll be like, yeah, this movie's in good shape.
Some Episode 9 horseplay would be great. That would be fantastic. So we'll see. But or maybe we get the title, press release saying the movie's done. Here's the title. Something like that. But some Episode 9 news, I think once they're done filming, hopefully they'll be willing to share even the tiniest bit of news, because there was a photo from day one of shooting, and it's been radio silence since then, completely from official sources. So anyway, it's just cool. It's cool to know. But even that, like I was saying, like the Anthony Daniels tweet is kind of sad, even just seeing these tweets in general, it's kind of sad when you think about it, like a little bit. It's like the sequel trilogy. It's a preview of how we're gonna feel in probably like mid-January of next year. I've already gone to see the movie 10 times in the theater. The whole cycle's wrapping up, and like, whoops, now the sequels are done.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah, it's gonna be kind of a bummer. So, all right. Well, that's the episode 9 non-updates that have been going on. So the other news thing we want to talk about was from Thursday morning. And these are the Galaxy's Edge books that were announced by StarWars.com. And we talked about the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge comic on this show, or did we just talk about that over text maybe?
I think it might be just text.
Yeah, maybe we haven't talked about this, but there is a Galaxy's Edge mini series coming up. And actually, when I saw this press release, I was like, oh, I didn't know for sure if it was a mini series or if it was an ongoing thing. But this is a little bit of a Tales from Jabba's Palace type setup, I guess you'd say. And there's this Ithorian character, Doc Ondar. And he runs like an antique shop in the I think in Galaxy's Edge in on Batuu, and he's just going to tell stories about stuff related to Batuu, I think, in the comics. So I mean, that to me, that's pretty exciting. I think that sounds like really fun.
Yeah And if you're reading some of the books and stuff that's coming out now, especially again Flight of the Falcon, you're already getting tastes of Batuu in there. So it's already started. This is this is going to be the stuff that like further expands that location. But if you wanna jump in now, Flight of the Falcon, do it.
Yeah. I need to do that myself. So, and I mean, there's clearly going to be no shortage of storytelling around Batuu and Galaxy's Edge, as evidenced by this press release. And this is like not even everything Batuu related that they're publishing this year, I think, too. So, it's pretty interesting. But the next one we have is a novel called Black Spire, and this is from Delilah S. Dawson, who wrote Phasma and has done some other Star Wars writing as well. And this is coming out September 3rd. So it's really interesting, actually, when you look at these release dates, when you think about it a little bit, because it's like September is generally when, the Force Friday type thing would be, and all the episode 9 publishing stuff would be happening. But I mean, it's too early probably to get those announcements at this point. Maybe Celebration will get that, but it just seems like, wait, you're releasing all this Galaxy's Edge stuff in, August and September. And that's generally when a lot of the sequel trilogy movie, or, whatever the new movie is, that's when the publishing related to that stuff would happen. So, I don't know. As I float that conspiracy theory out there, I'm already second guessing it though, because there's really only one full on novel here. And that's Black Spire, and that's coming out September. And actually, they don't usually do a novel, like an adult novel related to whatever the new movie is, that early, I think,
Yeah. And I mean, who's to say that Batuu isn't like tangentially related to episode 9?
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Like, is this evidence that Batuu is part of episode 9?
Yeah.
But then now, so here's the list: Galaxy's Edge comic, that's going to start in April, so that's not in that timeline. Then we get Black Spire from Delilah S. Dawson. That's September, so that's right when you expect, or I would expect, the sequel movie publishing to happen, episode 9 publishing to happen. But then there's
no. If you read the synopsis for Black Spire, it's totally related to episode 9. I mean, it's yeah, well, it fills in a gap between 8 and 9. So it says, in this novel, a prequel to the Disney Parks experience, General Leia Organa dispatches her top spy to Batuu in a desperate search for resistance allies. Like that
Okay.
could totally be something that takes place between 8 and 9.
Yeah, well, yeah. I guess that's true.
So
That's a
that
great.
would be like a lead in to 9.
Okay, great point. Yeah. Great point. It seems very likely. I think you're right. I think you're right, but not super direct. I mean, related, but like I'm thinking about The Last Jedi. There was no adult novel that came out that was like really setting up The Last Jedi, in that fall before the movie came out. So maybe this
I mean,
is
the Force Awakens novelization.
yeah, but that came out
Well, I know, but
when
like,
Force Awakens.
but it's different because Last Jedi was such a direct continuation of like the Force Awakens. It was like hours after.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be more of a gap between 8 and 9, and so like this makes more sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you're right, and I do think, yeah, it looks like there will be a stronger link than I was thinking. But I guess my thought is that they just don't seem to really want to reveal too much before the movie comes out, and they don't even want to put out like stuff that's too closely linked. You know what I mean? So maybe this is a good like middle ground where it's like, okay, it's sort of about Galaxy's Edge and that planet Batu, and it's like definitely maybe more of a tie-in with Galaxy's Edge than it is with Episode 9, but it's also going to, if you read that before Episode 9, it's it'll play in a certain way, or like it'll set up certain ideas in Episode 9 or whatever.
Yeah, which is kind of the way like Aftermath was for Force Awakens.
Yeah,
like you didn't really get much of that in the first book in the Aftermath trilogy, but by the time you got to like the third book, like it was, there was a lot of connections, and like that trilogy does set up Force Awakens really well.
right. But therein lies some of the problem with the reception to Aftermath, because I think a lot of us thought like, oh my god, there's a new Star Wars movie coming out like 6 months before they're going to put out this novel that's like really going to like be so meaty as far as like setting up this prequel era or this sequel era, and it's going to reveal so much, and it was like just its own thing. Which now I think we're a lot more equipped for that, like not to have expectations too high about what, that sort of stuff will be. Anyway, it's pretty exciting. I'm looking forward to it. Phasma, the book, I liked. I think we talked about it on the show way back when. There's certain parts of it that I didn't love as much, but I think like the writing and that sort of stuff I thought was strong. And there's just certain elements of the plot or the story, I guess, that I was like a little halvesies on. But I would put it definitely in the Star Wars novels I've enjoyed, new canon novels I've enjoyed, category.
Yeah,
for sure. Like,
I mean,
it's
definitely an interesting in like the way it's written and everything. Like it's you can tell that Delilah S. Dawson and Chuck Wendig are friends, and because they both have very interesting, takes and approaches to Star Wars writing. That are really unique to both of them, and I wouldn't be surprised if like they kind of leaned into each other and bounced ideas off each other when doing this. I think Phasma is like a fascinating book. I didn't 100% love it. I think both of us had some issues with kind of like the middle of the book, but I think like the bookends, the beginning and the end of that book are fantastic and like really captivating. I think like it's just kind of the middle bit is a little off and didn't quite feel Star Wars.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, definitely I walked away from that thinking like Delilah S. Dawson is one of the Star Wars authors that I think like I would definitely want to read more books from. So this is cool. Yeah, this is cool. There's also a young adult novel called Crash of Fate. And this is about Izzy and Jules, who Izzy's family leaves Batu when she's 6. Then she comes back, and Jules was there the whole time. And then they don't know how they feel about each other. But then there's these smugglers and an angry pirate that are chasing them. And guess what? They might fall in love. So, it sounds fun. It sounds fun. I'm looking forward to that. But it just reading it, it sounds very well tread ground, as far as young adult plots go and stuff. But I think that's That's what that's part of the appeal to of young adult books to the audience they're written for, is that there's a certain kind of story that really resonates a lot with young adult readers, and I think this sounds like it'll be one of those. But I'm I plan on reading it. It sounds pretty good.
Yeah, that sounds fun to me.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to be like Lost Stars 2, where we read it and we're like, oh, this is like maybe secretly the best Star Wars book. It sounds like a little more standard YA fare than that.
I don't know. I mean, who knows? Like reading the synopsis for Lost Stars 2, we might have been like, I mean, I was not expecting that to be the best Star Wars book ever written going into it.
No, yeah, I know. Yeah.
But then there you go.
Keep an open mind, I guess. So
yeah, because this is another new Star Wars writer.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with her. Possible that there's like a short story in Insider, or maybe I don't think in that 40 years of Star Wars book, that the one that I haven't read all of, with all the short stories in it, 40 short stories.
Maybe.
But I think a new author. So who knows? Could be great. Last one I think is really exciting too. It's called Star Wars Myths and Fables. And this is by George Mann, who I think is also new to Star Wars, and includes illustrations from Grant Griffin. And this is a middle grade novel. So I think that means like sort of like sixth grade kind of thing. And it features two stories that take place on Batuu, and a bunch of other untold tales from the edge of the galaxy. So Outer Rim, or maybe even how am I losing the term now? Where Snoke and the unknown regions, maybe from there. But it says it's a lushly illustrated in a style that pays homage to real world children's classics. So gonna have a total like fairy tale type vibe. I remember having those books, full of fairy tales when I was a kid, and really pouring through those and enjoying all the art associated with them and that kind of thing. So it sounds, I just love this. I love anytime that Star Wars gets a little, just like kind of, actually I say that and I'm like, I don't know if it's true. I was gonna say, I love it whenever Star Wars goes a little into the fantasy direction, but I'm like, wait, do I?
Yeah, no, because you don't like Old Republic, and that's like total like like Star Wars Tolkien.
Yeah, and I don't like the Mortis trilogy either, and that's another one that people love, and I feel like that's got a little more of that like fantasy, fairy tale type thing to it too. So maybe I don't know what I like, but I like the cover of this, and I like the idea. I like the concept.
Yeah.
And you know what? This is the perfect medium for that sort of thing too, though, because it's a children's book. It's not, so like it's very much framed in, hey, these are fables and myths. These are just stories that people tell. So if there's something, it's like the Legends of Luke Skywalker book. You know what I mean? Like he did all kinds of crazy stuff in that book, but that was just people telling stories about him. So I don't know if he did it or not. And it's just, you can have fun with it, and it's not a big deal. So
which is the way you should approach like all Star Wars storytelling. They're all myths and legends from a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah, you know what? I'll tell you what, Ryan. That's a great point. And actually, as you say that, I think that leads in pretty well to our listener feedback that we have, our voicemail from the Rural Farm Boy.
Yeah, real quick before we jump into that, I grabbed my From a Certain Point of View book off my shelf. And Zoraida Cordova, who is writing A Crash of Fate, did have a story in From a Certain Point of View.
Oh, okay. Which one was that? Oh, you don't have the table.
No, I'm just looking at the cover. But also, looking at this cover, like, basically, this is like looking at the authors on here, this is a really good indicator of who would go on to write Star Wars books in the future. Because a lot of these people here, who I wasn't familiar with going into this book, have now written Star Wars novels and or comics. So that's something really interesting looking back now, like a year or 2 year and a half later, that many of these people have written a lot of Star Wars stories since then.
Yep.
So
It's kind of the who's who of Star Wars authors.
yeah.
At least currently contemporary. Yeah. Right on. Cool. Okay. Well, yeah. So last week's episode was all about Star Wars Resistance, and we kind of went through the second half of the episodes that have come out so far. We talked a bunch about those, and sort of Ryan was catching up on the show, so we were kind of checking in with you, Ryan, and sort of discussing your thoughts on the show, your opinion and stuff. And we have a voicemail here from Roll Farm Boy, which we'll play, and here it is.
Howdy, Ryan and John. Wow, I'm on a real CR90 Corvette. Oh, this here's Anthony. You know me better in that Twitterverse as Rural Farm Boy. I just had your show in my playlist today. Dang, it was a bit of a tough one to get through, but I done did it. And got some thoughts as I was listening pretty much toward the tail end of the show about, I think it was Ryan was kind of pretty much saying he weren't sure just kind of how to take Star Wars Resistance because it's more meant for kids. My thinking on it, and I'm not going to try to change your mind. You're going to find your own aim to it and your own way to it. But how I takes it for me, I takes it just like how the folks calls the films and the novels, books and such. I call them all stories. They're all Star Wars stories, no matter what the format is. And I took it that way. I'm original generation. I'm 52. When I get in Star Wars, I'm a 52-year-old, 12-year-old. So that's exactly how I take Resistance. It's somebody wants to tell me a Star Wars story, straight up. And I take it as just that. No matter what all is in it or what kind of direction it goes. So maybe if you're still not sure how to take it, take a step or two back and ask yourself, you want to be told a Star Wars story? Because there's folks want to tell you one. Take it for just what it is, that. Don't matter who it's meant for. It's meant for Star Wars fans. What was it Athena Portillo said? From 7 to 77. So straight up, there it is. Just like you were saying, you weren't quite sure at the beginning when it was being promoted, and you were kind of looking at it, and then as you were watching, it didn't seem to be what you thought you were going to get. Again, I will ask you, before we ever got a next Star Wars story, when did you ever know what you was going to get? Because none of us ever did. And then after we got it, we loved it so much. Even other couple points where you was mentioning that friends are asking you, should I watch it or is it worth it? And plain straight up answer is right back up to the top. You want to be told a Star Wars story? Because if you do, somebody is got one they want to tell you. And this year is going on pretty long, so I'm going to get to the end of this here now. I'll have you in my playlist again next week and see what you're talking about. And maybe get you some more of my thoughts. So till that next time, may the Force be with you both. See you on the radio.
All right. Yeah, so that's awesome. Thank you so much, Rural Farm Boy, for writing in. And we do hope to hear from you again in the future. But what do you think about that, Ryan, about the idea of kind of there's Star Wars stories to be told, and are you looking to hear a Star Wars story?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really good approach to, to extra Star Wars material, like outside of the films and stuff. Like, not to go into it thinking like, is this like something I have to, consume to like extend my enjoyment and understanding of Star Wars, or am I just in the mood for a Star Wars movie or a Star Wars TV show that looks and sounds like this, and and just ready to go into it without like my own baggage and expectations, and just see what the story is that these talented folks want to tell.
Yeah, and it's good to be reminded of that, because I feel like, it's easy to kind of, for me personally, I just mentioned like Mortis and different like arcs and stuff that I don't really like. It's easier for me to lose sight of that. But I think the thing with the animation too that makes it a little tricky is that it's so high quality, it's so good, and it's to me, like I was just talking about that middle grade book, that fairy tale book or whatever, that's coming out later in the year. It's like that's so far from a Star Wars movie that it's easier for my brain and easier for me to be like, well, this is just, like Rural Farm Boy said, it's just a Star Wars story somebody's telling, and if I love it, I love it. If I don't, I don't have to like stress out about it. But I feel like the closer it gets to a movie, it's like a novel, like a full on like adult novel is a little closer. A video game with like really high production values like Battlefront 2, which we'll talk about that in a few minutes, that's a little closer to a movie. You get to shows like Rebels and Resistance and Clone Wars, and they're so high quality and so high budget and all those sorts of things that it's like, wow, this feels really close to the experience I have watching a Star Wars movie. And I feel like the closer and closer I get to like the experience of a Star Wars movie, it's like the more I am going to fret about it a little bit. But that's something that, if you just kind of stop and think about it, like, kind of take a step back, like Rural Farm Boy said there, then yeah, you know what I mean? It's like, you can sort of say, well, it's just a Star Wars story, and, I can relax and enjoy it. And if I don't love it, it's not the end of the world. But overthinking it, I guess, which we have a tendency to do is
yeah,
maybe not necessary. So good reminder there. Also loved, the little reference to the Corvette there in the beginning. That was good. Shout out to the name of the show here, the Blockade Runner. So appreciate that. But great comments there from Anthony, Roll Farm Boy, and hopefully we hear more from you in the future. Thanks for listening for sure. And anybody else who'd like to share feedback on the show or just share their thoughts on Star Wars, you can always do so at blockaderunnerpodcast@gmail.com. So should we jump into our main topic here, Ryan?
Yeah.
Electronic arts and Star Wars.
So the reason I wanted to kind of talk about this is because, electronic arts and Star Wars, they're back in the news because they have just, EA has just recently announced, kind of like the middle of January, they announced that they were canceling an open world Star Wars game that was in development. And we'll kind of, I wanted to kind of go through, and because, EA cancels Star Wars game is like becoming a very like familiar headline in the past 6 years. And this is not the first time this has happened. And so I wanted to kind of like retrace the steps to see kind of how this continues to happen. And I mean, like the what went wrong sort of approach, or maybe nothing's gone wrong. But so I just wanted to, with that as like the jumping off point, the most recent cancellation of a Star Wars game, kind of go into, what led us to this point.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely a really interesting scenario here, and it's like one of those things where if we start with this initial press release, it seemed really exciting from a certain perspective, but then again, it's also limiting because of the exclusivity thing. So it was definitely, this was 2013, dawn of a new era for Star Wars in a lot of ways, and for Star Wars video games. For sure, it was. So we just kick it off here with this initial press release or this initial announcement.
Yeah. So they announced, and this was May 6th, 2013. And, in the press release, they said every developer dreams of creating games for the Star Wars universe. 3 of our top studios will fulfill that dream, crafting epic adventures for Star Wars fans. DICE and Visceral will produce new games, joining the BioWare team, which continues to develop for the Star Wars franchise. The new experiences we create may borrow from films, but the games will be entirely original with all new stories and gameplay.
Okay, so DICE, Visceral, and BioWare. And then also there within Disney retains the right to make social and casual games, which I suppose they've done a little bit, but even on mobile, EA is pretty heavy into doing mobile games, Star Wars mobile games too. So yeah, but as far as the main console and PC games go, it's all EA from this point on, from 2013 on. And those 3 studios. So, you're probably more familiar with and have played more games from those studios. Like at the time, how did you feel about this like announcement at the time? Like, was this pretty exciting?
So yeah, like the developer I was kind of least excited about was DICE, which is funny and ironic how this all worked out. But DICE is the developer of the Battlefield games, and which are kind of like the primary competitor to Call of Duty. They are grounded war shooters with like a small single player component in each of them, but the primary focus is on multiplayer, competitive multiplayer. So that was kind of what I was like least excited about, because I don't really play competitive online shooters like outside of like Overwatch and some Halo. So yeah, that was kind of least exciting for me. The 2 I was really excited for, however, was Visceral and BioWare. At this point, Visceral had made the Dead Space games, which the first 2 of those games I think are some of the best survival horror games that I've played. They lean a bit more on the action side of survival horror, so like they're very clearly inspired by like Resident Evil 4, but they are survival horror in space. So like I would say the Dead Space games are kind of a mix between like Resident Evil 4 and Aliens, which are things that I like a lot. So the third game was a little like went for more of like an leaned way more in on like the action approach. So like I wasn't as into that one. It lost a lot of the horror elements, but the first 2 I think are just absolutely fantastic. And they did some really cool like world building and stuff in there. And yeah, I love those games a lot. So yeah, I was really, really excited for their take on Star Wars. And then finally, BioWare, their big Star Wars connection is they developed the original Knights of the Old Republic game, which is, many people's favorite Star Wars video game ever made. A lot of fans of that universe and those characters. But they've also done incredible work with like the Mass Effect series and, going even further back, like the Baldur's Gate games on PC. just an incredible developer that I like a lot, and I was really excited to see what like a modern Star Wars game from them would look like. But it was obvious here that they were, continuing to support their MMO, The Old Republic, which has been going on PC for I mean, probably close to a decade at this point. But we were kind of also hoping like they would, do something else as well.
So that was funny to me, and embarrassing, I guess, a little bit as I was reading through this press release from 2013 and some of the other material we're going to talk about, like these references to the Old Republic and it continuing to be developed and stuff like that. And me just sort of thinking, wait, what? There's like an Old Republic game that's like still happening and people still play. And it's like, I think of the Old Republic as some Xbox game that came out in like 2005 or even earlier. I don't know when that game came out, Knights of the Old Republic or whatever it is. So, but this is like the Old Republic would be like the MMO type thing, right? That like a PC MMO or something.
Yes.
That's just continued to be a thing all this time.
Yeah.
It's like completely under the radar for me. So
yeah. And it's also like it's weird. I mean, I played the Old Republic for probably like the first 6 months that it was out, and I really enjoyed it. But then like when it gets to like MMO in-game type stuff and like the commitment that comes with that, like I don't have the time or attention span for it. But like that game was great, but it's really funny because it's that MMO is like old canon because it was developed before the deal and like the quote unquote canon wipe. So like it's kind of like the weird last bastion of the
the pre-canon reset site. Yeah,
and it's like still being developed with like its own, it's still getting new stories and new characters, but like none of it, like, air quotes counts. And that's just really funny and interesting. And like, I would love to hear from anyone who's still playing the Old Republic or who has even played it like within the past like 2 or 3 years to see like what is going on with that game. Like, what's the community like? Like, what is happening? Are the developers supporting it? Is it running well? Are you getting new content? Like, I don't know anyone who still plays that game, and which is a bummer because it's a really, really good game. But yeah, I would love to know like how people are feeling about that now, and like what does it look like it has a future, or does it look like this thing's going to be shut down in a year? Like what is the deal? It's fascinating to me.
Yeah, like I said, I was just fascinated to hear that it existed or still existed. So yeah, but sure, any insight on that would be cool to hear. I don't know if we have anybody in our small listener pool who is still playing that game or not, but that would be, or ever played it. But definitely let us know if you did. So that was 2013. Then 2015, and I guess I was going to mention sort of like you were most excited about the Visceral and BioWare stuff, but it turns out probably DICE is the one you should have been most excited about, because there's actually games that have come from DICE, and they're the of those three. So, and their first game was Battlefront in 2015, the initial Star Wars Battlefront. So we talk about that real quick, I guess. My initial experience with Battlefront was like, oh my God, this game is gorgeous. I wish I had a console that could play this game. So I kind of sat it out for the first year, at least, I think, because I didn't have a PS4 or Xbox One or anything I could play it on. And it was one of the things that, kind of prompted me to end up getting a PS4, but it was like the next, I think it was probably Christmas 2016 when I got the PS4. I don't remember for sure. Does that sound right? I don't know. Anyways, but I got a PS4 down the road and got the game. It was really beautiful. And did, I thought, an amazing job of sort of recreating the Star Wars universe in a playable format. But that game is basically online only for the most part, and I'm not a big online gamer. So that was a frustration that I think a lot of people had with the original Battlefront, which was, corrected in a lot of ways anyways, for Battlefront 2. But I'm trying to remember. I know you played it when it first came out, Battlefront in 2015, and enjoyed it well enough, or
yeah. I mean, I think like the experience that is like the best experience I had with it was playing. Kevin and I played it online together for we had like a few great sessions of just like on a like late on a Friday night. We played on Xbox Live, and just playing and jumping into games like as a team, and not taking it super seriously, and just like talking and playing and enjoying, and like pointing out like little Easter eggs and stuff that we'd see. And like I think that was like the primary enjoyment of it for
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of players out there that got like seriously invested in that game, were really good at it, played it a ton. And that's awesome for them. It's also one of the reasons that I didn't play it all that much, is because like you'd go into an online match, and for me anyways, I'm really bad at that kind of game. It's not the kind of game I play, like first person shooters or whatever. I don't do that really. So it was really bad, and it would be like I'd boot up the game and be dead in 15 seconds or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, what am I even doing? Like, I don't even really know what's kind of going on here and stuff like that. But I did have some sessions too, playing online with like Kevin and our other friend Matt. And there was I forget what they called the mode now, but there were like little, you had to play them online, but there was like little missions you could do where you teamed up with another player. And
was that like arcade or something?
Well, that's what they call it in Battlefront 2, and it's like a similar concept. Maybe that's what they called it in Battlefront as well.
No, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And that was the most fun I had with it, honestly. The big what is it, like 40 player battles and stuff online. Like I was so bad at that. And then also in the original Battlefront, the starfighting stuff, the starfighter stuff, like didn't really click with me very well in the first Battlefront. And then in Battlefront 2, it actually did quite a bit more. So, but I guess, kind of for the purposes of this conversation here, EA and Star Wars and sort of how this deal is all played out and everything, there was the reception, I guess, of Battlefront was a little bit mixed, but I think like looking back on it, for the first kind of big game coming from them, like it's astounding to look at. And it's a really specific kind of game, but for the kind of game it is, I think it's pretty darn good. And so I'd like, I think that's a pretty successful game. I mean, I'm sure it was financially successful and stuff too, but it's just that it looking back at it now, it's a little bit of a sign of problems to come, in the sense that like, if this was one item on a menu of Star Wars games from EA that I could choose from, it'd be like, oh, that game's amazing. It's not really the kind of game that I like, but EA's got me covered because they've also put out 3 other Star Wars games in the last 2 years, and 1 or 2 of those are the kind of game that I like to play.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not really the way it has worked out. So I think that's where like my kind of biggest concern with like the whole Battlefront thing is. It's not that I don't like it, but it's just that like that's really all we've gotten. It's 2019. They signed this deal in 2013, and basically we've gotten 2 Battlefront games as far as like big Star Wars games go. And that's not great. So
and then I think like now before we get into 2016, I think now would be a good time to mention there were other Star Wars games on consoles but in like 2015, 2016. The Lego Force Awakens came out, which was really good. But that was from, actually, I don't
Traveler's
remember.
Tales, right? Aren't they the ones?
Yeah, but I don't remember who published it, because EA didn't publish it. I think like WB.
Yeah, I think all the Lego games are through Warner Brothers, right?
Yeah, so that game was like really good, and that was like another one that if you play it on a PS4 or Xbox One, like that like felt like a generational leap in visuals. I remember the first time I saw Lego Force Awakens. I think we have it for PS4. I was like, wow, this looks really nice. Like, it looks like, you know, it kind of looks like the Freemaker Adventures or like Lego Star Wars like animated movies.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I bought it on the PC first. I have it on PS4 now, but I bought it on the PC first, and my PC could like barely run it. You know, it had all these like had all this like screen tearing and frame dropping and stuff. And you know, I don't have a good PC, but especially now, it's not a good PC. But at the time, it was not great. But I mean, you'd think like for a Lego game, it ought to be able to run it. But clearly, it was pretty beefy and yeah, visually very impressive. So I don't know how that happened. I would assume that basically like Warner Brothers, Traveler's Tales, whoever, they had some kind of deal with, you know, to do Lego Star Wars games for a certain amount of time, I'm guessing, and that extended into the EA exclusivity period. But you know, you'd have to, I don't know. We never got a Lego Rogue One or Last Jedi or anything like that. And I would think that we would have if it weren't for this EA deal, but I don't know.
Yeah. And that, I think that's like a huge bummer and a huge loss.
Oh yeah.
Because those games are good. Those games are fun. Yeah, like it was. They recently on Xbox One, not recently. This was like a year or two ago. They made the complete Lego Star Wars, like episodes 1 through 6. They made those. They made that backwards compatible on Xbox One, and I went and like played through. Like I think I played through all the prequels again on that, and you know, those games are still like so fun. They're not like my favorite Star Wars games or anything, but like, man, I would have like day one bought like, you know, Lego Solo like whatever easily, like,
totally. Yeah,
great. Like Lego Resistance, any of that.
Yeah. No, that would have been amazing. Star Wars Rebels Lego, you know, Star Wars Resistance Lego would have been so good.
Totally. And also like kids love those games. Like kids love Lego and kids love Star Wars.
Well, this is, like, I mean, this is the problem. If you're Lucasfilm and you do this deal with EA, and I don't know what they were expecting or hoping for, or maybe they knew this going into it and are fine with it, but you know, don't you want to capture the imagination of children? Don't you want children to be spending more time in the Star Wars universe and like being excited about Star Wars? Right now, my wife and my kids are playing Lego Harry Potter. They're super into it. All three of them are really enjoying playing that game together and stuff. And, you know, that's an old game too. And it was just on sale on PS4, which is why I got it for them. But, you know, it's like, they are super into Harry Potter right now, and then like when they can go downstairs and like boot up the PS4 and like spend more time in the world of Harry Potter in a game that's designed for them, for kids, like it's a perfect situation. You know, it's like it's exactly what you want in like video games surrounding a property like that. And you know, when all you're really getting from EA is a couple of Battlefront games, that's not, you know, happening. My kids aren't playing Battlefront.
No.
Although my older son has played a little bit of Battlefront, but it's not like really hooking him. It's not totally, you know, it's not for him really. It's for, you know, teenagers and up who want to spend like 5 hours a day honing their skills at headshots and stuff. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. I guess there was the other EA Star Wars associated or Star Wars, you know, partially Star Wars game, which was what was it called again, Ryan? I've got like all these figures in the office.
Disney
here.
Infinity.
Disney Infinity. There it is. Disney Infinity.
And that was the other one that was like, you know, more kid friendly.
Sorry. Yes. Yeah, it was. It was awesome. I was just getting up to like try to get I just wanted to like look at one of my little Disney Infinity guys as we have this conversation, but it wasn't readily accessible enough on the shelf. It's over there somewhere. Yeah, and I played all of the Star Wars stuff in Disney Infinity 2?
3.0.
Yeah, 3.0. Okay, because they weren't in the other. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I played all that. My son Owen played all that. We had a lot of fun with that. It was great. And I'm really bummed that I mean, I understand why that shut down, because like financially, I think Toys to Life and all that stuff, it probably was not worth the return on the investment wasn't strong enough or whatever. So, you know, it makes sense. But that was really fun, and that I had more fun with that than I did with Battlefront.
Yeah.
You know, not more than Battlefront 2 probably, but more fun than I had with Battlefront.
Same.
And if there would have been solo content for that or Resistance or whatever, like it would have been amazing.
I know. That's like Disney Infinity. That one, like, that hurt when that shut down. Because I was like, I was loving that. I was loving collecting the figures. And I was like, I was ready to start like expanding my collection outside of the Star Wars stuff. Because, you know, it started being like, well, if this is going to be a platform, you know, like there's other stuff here that I want. Like I want to try like the Marvel games and like get some of those Marvel figures. Like I want some of the Pixar stuff. Like I want the Inside Out set, which is like my favorite Pixar movie. And then like it was pretty soon after they released 3.0 that they were like, actually no. Like this is not going to keep happening.
Yeah, and it was a bummer because there was Rogue One content that they had started developing, and you know, Disney Infinity figures that they had started developing, and that stuff never happened. So, but the figures were great, and they ended up being clearanced out, and you could get them pretty cheap. So that was cool.
Yeah.
I didn't have all of them, but I have quite a few of the Disney Infinity figures, which I loved. And then those figures kind of live on in the Toy Box series from the Disney Store, and I know you've collected some of those, right? So
yeah, I'm actually making a Disney Store trip today. Ooh, so nice. I'm excited to grab a couple more for my collection there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so should we jump into the future of EA Star Wars games?
Yeah. So this is where it really starts getting bittersweet if it wasn't already. 2016 is where like the real heartbreak begins, because that's when at EA Play, which is their sort of like E3 event, they did this blog post and video by Jade Raymond, who is former Ubisoft. She was like a major creative force behind the Assassin's Creed series, and now is at Motive Studios. She laid out like, this is what the next few years of Star Wars games are going to be. And so this was like the moment where, did we record a podcast about this, or did we just talk about it? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think we might have done a podcast on this. I know we did some looking towards Battlefront 2 type podcast.
Yeah.
So maybe that was, yeah.
So this was like, this is the future of Star Wars games. The future looks good. So she started like, it starts off talking about, 2016 Battlefront is going to continue to get support with these like digital expansion packs, which this was Battlefront 1 was a very pricey experience for me. Because I had the game on both PS4 and Xbox One, so I could play with all of my friends across between the two platforms. And for Battlefront 1, the like extra maps, characters, and all that were paid expansions. So I was buying the expansions for both consoles, in addition to owning the game on both consoles, which was absurd in retrospect. But, it was that, it was like, this is Star Wars is back. Like, this is a Star Wars game that we can play online with our friends. Like, I wanted those experiences. So that, that was happening. And then like the coolest thing about Battlefront 1, my absolute favorite part of Battlefront 1 was in December of 2016, EA and DICE worked with Criterion on an exclusive Star Wars Battlefront VR mission for PSVR on the PlayStation 4 side of things. And this was the dream. This was Star Wars in virtual reality in your home. And this was kind of the reason why I bought PSVR was basically for this experience. And which is hilarious because it's like maybe 10 minutes of content. However, I have played through this like single mission countless times on PSVR, and it's still like just such a cool experience, and it still is like every time I pick it up, it's just incredible to be like, I am doing Star Wars VR in my home. Like, this rules. And then I was like, man, I cannot wait to see what comes next. Like, this is a taste. When are we getting that full Star Wars PSVR game? Well, still waiting on that.
Yeah, what do you think the deal is with that? Just like that EA just doesn't put out much content related to Star Wars, it seems, or do you think it's like PSVR not doing big enough numbers to sort of like support, or for them to want to support it that way, or who knows? I guess, huh?
I mean, who knows? Like, PSVR is like the best-selling, major VR platform. And it's still in stores. It's still getting new bundles, still getting new games. Like, it's an active platform and it has a huge attach rate too. Like, people who buy PSVR buy a lot of games for it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I'm putting myself in, and we're getting ahead of ourselves here because we haven't talked about, and we've mentioned the Visceral game getting canceled, but it's like, oh, Amy Hennig and Visceral are making this really cool action adventure game with heavy story elements. Oh, but it's only like probably 6 to 10 hours long, and there's no like major online component to it, and people could sell it after they buy it, and it just seems like EA's not in it to make stuff that's going to be marginally successful. So if you have PSVR and 15% of PS4 owners own a PSVR, and you're only going to sell your Star Wars game to 50% of them, like, is it worth it to invest in making a full game for that platform to a company like EA? I'm not saying they couldn't be financially, they couldn't be profitable making it, but like, it doesn't seem like they're really interested in doing anything unless there's giant returns on it, so that's where I'm like, well, that's the problem.
No, I think that's pretty fair. Yeah. So then continuing in 2016, Galaxy of Heroes, which is the mobile game. Have you played it? I haven't actually played it.
No.
Okay. Well,
it doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Me neither. And then in December of 2016, BioWare celebrated the 5th anniversary of Star Wars: The Old Republic, and it continued to got like big updates and such to continue that game. And then also in this video, we're not there yet. So then they talk about 2017. A new installment of Star Wars Battlefront is currently in development at DICE. And it's in collaboration with Motive Studios in Montreal. And we would this is pretty important because Motive is who would go on to develop the single player component of Battlefront 2, which we didn't know at the time of this future of Star Wars EA Play thing. But that's, just telling us that, Battlefront 2 is happening. That was not a surprise considering Battlefront 1 had sold really, really well. And, it had all that stuff that EA wanted. It had people buying those expansion packs and, so it was like monetized past, the initial release, and they were like dripping out content so people wouldn't sell their copy of the game. So that was like EA was feeling pretty good about their Star Wars stuff at this point. And then they talked about coming in 2018 was, I'll just read this verbatim. A brand new Star Wars story will debut in a new action-adventure game from Visceral Games. I've been blown away by the level of collaboration between the story team at Lucasfilm and Amy Hennig and the team at Visceral as they create an original, authentic narrative in the Star Wars universe. It is an amazing example of how we're taking an already strong partnership to another level.
Yeah, it would have been. Sounds like it would have been.
Yeah. And so I don't know, did you rewatch this video, John?
No, I just read the blog post. I didn't rewatch the video.
So if you watch the video, and I put a link in here that we can link in the episode show notes. I have it started right at like the Visceral Games part. And so then you have Amy Hennig, who, if you don't know, like she's like in a video game industry veteran. She worked on the Legacy of Kain games and the first reboot of the Tomb Raider series at Crystal Dynamics, and then she went on to Naughty Dog and like co-developed the Uncharted series there, and was, you know, pretty responsible for a lot of the storytelling in the first couple Uncharted games, and which were, you know, especially 2 was like super well received. So like her EA getting her on a Star Wars game was like a really big coup at the time. And so if you watch the video, and I have it again, like the link I have in here is starting right at that section. It shows her collaborating with Doug Chiang from Lucasfilm. And so there was like this really deep collaboration between, you know, Lucasfilm and the story team and the, you know, like development side over there with Amy Hennig and Visceral. And it seemed like they were setting up something really, really big and exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the Uncharted games. I didn't really play them. I played a little bit of like 1 or 2 of them and was like, I don't know if it's quite my thing, but it seemed way more my thing than Battlefront. And, you know, like the level of respect that people have for Amy Hennig as a developer, writer, creator, etc. It just seemed like EA was like, okay, we're going to get like sort of the best person in the industry for this kind of game and put her on, you know, sort of what I view as the best intellectual property. So you take like the best creator of that kind of game, put them on like the number one sort of like most exciting sort of like property that they could be, you know, developing. Amy Hennig and Star Wars put it together. You know, you read this post, it seems like we're really behind this game. We're putting a lot of resources into it. Lucasfilm believes in it. We believe in it. It just sounds incredible, you know? So I think it's a real shame that that game is never going to happen at this point.
Yeah. So like, you know, at that point, you know, as fans of video games and Star Wars, you know, I think most of us were like, wow, things are looking pretty good for the next few years. And then they're like, to kind of close this blog post, this video, this, you know, Future of Star Wars from 2016 out, it's mentioned that, and I'll just quote from here, that's not all we have in production right now. Our partners at Respawn Entertainment are making their own third-person action-adventure game, one that features a different style of gameplay and takes place in a different timeline we have yet to explore with our Star Wars titles. And we're in pre-production on some other projects we think you're going to be excited about as well. And then no matter what the genre you play or the platform you play on, we will have a great Star Wars game for you. So that was 2016. And then I think, I was really excited about what was happening with this, when they brought Respawn into the fold as well, because this was, I was a big fan of the original Titanfall on Xbox One, and then Titanfall 2 from Respawn was like even better and had like one of the best story campaigns in a shooter, and I really enjoyed that. So like, I'm pretty excited about what Respawn has coming, which is still coming. That is one that's still coming, but like that was another like cool announcement. And then like, the idea that they're in pre-production on these other things, and no matter what platform you play on, like we've got a Star Wars game for you, no matter what genre. And yeah, so then let's fast forward a bit to when was this? Oh, I don't have a date on this. Bummer. But the post here, the next thing we kind of hear from EA around the Visceral Star Wars project is this post that they had on their website, an update on the Visceral Star Wars project. And the subhead is a change to one of our upcoming titles. And it says here, our Visceral Studio has been developing an action-adventure title set in the Star Wars universe. In its current form, it was shaping up to be a story-based linear adventure game. Throughout the development process, we have been testing the game concept with players, listening to the feedback about what they want and how they want to play, and closely tracking fundamental shifts in the marketplace. It has become clear that to deliver an experience that players will want to come back to and enjoy for a long time to come, we need to pivot the design. We will maintain the stunning visuals, authenticity in the Star Wars universe, and focus on bringing a Star Wars story to life. Importantly, we are shifting the game to be a broader experience that allows for more variety and player agency, leaning into the capabilities of our Frostbite engine and reimagining central elements of the game to give players a Star Wars adventure of greater depth and breadth to explore. This move leads to a few other changes. A development team from across EA Worldwide Studios will take over development of this game, led by a team from EA Vancouver that has already been working on the project. Our Visceral Studio will be ramping down and closing, and we're in the midst of shifting as many of the team as possible to other projects and teams at EA.
Yeah, so basically, a story-driven game that's just single-player focused, doesn't have online microtransactions, and online play isn't the behemoth like 2-year long, constantly growing player base type of game that we want to make. We're not interested in making video games that are not, that. And so we're just going to try to turn it into something it's not, is what it sounds like. To me, that's how I read that press release. It's become clear that we've got to pivot the design so that we can like keep making money on this thing month after month after month for like 2 years straight. And it has to be online, and it has to have multiplayer, and it can't just be a story-driven game. And if it's only 8 or 10 hours long, then people are going to sell it a month after they get it, and we don't make those kind of games.
Yeah, essentially. And like that's how it felt from that press release. And it was pretty easy to read between the lines on that from like a corporate perspective. But then the story becomes a bit more complicated if you read an article published on Kotaku in October of 2017 by Jason Schreier, who is like pretty much like the dude for getting, in getting scoops on internal studio politics and game development.
Yeah, he's like the investigative journalist of video game development or whatever.
Yeah, basically, he wrote a book a couple of years ago called Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, and that actually there's a chapter in there that chronicles the the end and cancellation of Star Wars 1313, which was going to be like a next generation Star Wars game at Lucasfilm before the Disney buyout. But he wrote this article, "The Collapse of Visceral's Ambitious Star Wars Game," and this article, it's kind of a long read, and it adds some more like nuance to the situation, and I don't want to just like paraphrase it because that won't give like the full picture, but they're to kind of like summarize, which I think you should, if you're interested in this stuff, I think you should read this article. But to summarize, there were quite a few factors that led to Visceral's game not happening. And I mean, probably the biggest one would have been the lack of support from the publisher. And I mean, you can't really do much when, your publisher doesn't really believe in your game and doesn't want you to make that game. But there's also other factors where there was some, like a lot of unhappy staff at Visceral because they had just been, like their kind of pet project. There was the Dead Space series, and Dead Space had kind of been like shut down. And then they were put on to make a Battlefield spinoff. And then they split the team further after their Battlefield game, Battlefield Hardline, came out to like half the team got to go work on the Star Wars game, and then half the team had to do expansion content for Battlefield Hardline. And that felt like a really big divide within the company because no one really wanted to do the Battlefield content. And then the fact that their studio was located in San Francisco, which was becoming even more of an expensive place to live and, to pay employees sustainable salaries was becoming more and more of a challenge there. And so there was a lot of factors happening. And I just like suggest to read the article. But the long and short of it was it had been, Visceral was closed. Amy Hennig left. And that's where we're kind of at, leading into the release of Battlefront 2. And so we were right on the front lines of this. I can remember this time period very well. Us all texting back and forth because it was pretty unprecedented leading into the launch of Battlefront 2. Do you want to talk a little bit about the pre-release of Battlefront 2 and how we were kind of feeling and what sort of happened there?
Well, I'll try to remember, Ryan. I definitely remember being excited for Battlefront 2. And I'm not sure what my thoughts going into. I think I was probably a little, honestly, a little trepidatious. I mean, I was excited about the game because there were things in Battlefront 1 that I liked a lot, but obviously, like I said, it wasn't totally for me. But that being said, this game promised a single player campaign, which it delivered. So that I was looking forward to for sure. I think you're talking though about all the drama related to the microtransactions, like in the week before the game came out.
Yeah, but I mean, even before that, like, I felt like we were feeling pretty high on it going into it. Like, there was that John Boyega video where he was talking about like the single player component, and then there was the Christy Golden book about Inferno Squad, which I read and like loved. And I was really excited to kind of get the story behind the single player component. And then there was all the prequel content in the multiplayer.
Yeah.
And I remember we played the PS4 beta.
Yeah, we did a show about that.
Yeah, and like playing in like Theed Palace and stuff, like and on Naboo, and like how cool it was. Like I was feeling really good going into Battlefront 2. I was really, really excited for this game, and apparently the gaming community less so.
Yeah, it was one of those things where like sometimes a controversy or something that people get mad about kind of like catches fire within like Twitter and gaming forums and just like, I guess like the gaming community or whatever. And this was one of those things that like went from 0 to 60 in terms of people being angry. I feel like really quickly, and not without good reason, because it was like, it seemed like, hey, you're buying this game for $60, but then we're really through microtransactions going to try to bleed a bunch of money out of people, sort of continually as you play the game. And a lot of people weren't too excited about that, obviously. And what was it, like just a couple days before the game came out or something like that, they kind of like went back and changed their microtransaction policy and took them out at the launch of the game for a time. And it was in reaction to sort of everybody freaking out. But
it was literally the day before.
Okay, the actual day before the game came out.
The day before the game came out.
Yeah, and so that's like, man, I mean, I'm sure those microtransactions obviously were like a huge part of their plan for the game and their whole like, sort of their plans for making money on the game. And so to completely change that on a dime, like the day before the game comes out, is indicative of what a firestorm there was around this whole thing. And there were rumors too. I don't know if they're true or not, but there were rumors at the time that old Bob Iger got on the phone with EA and was like, "You need to fix this because it's making Star Wars look really bad. Like it was bad for the brand." And it was back then when I started to think, a lot of people started to think, not an original idea of mine, but something that I was, definitely considering is like, how much longer is this EA Star Wars deal going to last? Because it just seems like it's been a real mess. And you have to wonder how happy the people at Disney are with this whole, kind of deal. But yeah, they turned off the microtransactions. A lot of people bought the game, but a lot of people, I remember there was a lot of discussion on like podcasts I listened to and like video game sites that I read and stuff, like a lot of discussion of like, I'm never buying another EA game again. Like I'm done with EA. I hate EA. I'm not buying Battlefront 2. I'd love to play it, but I'm just cannot support EA anymore. And I don't know how many people are still like completely boycotting EA. And from EA's perspective, I don't know how large of a piece of the overall pie that is for them, people that boycott EA or whatever. But yeah, this was like another kind of event in a list of events that like really turned people off to EA. And I just remember like a lot of straight up like fury towards EA because of Battlefront 2 at the time. And it was a bummer because I think like the game did not perform the way it would have if it weren't for this controversy. And even though they took these microtransactions out for a long time, and when they brought them back, they did so in a more legitimate way. There was a stench left on this game that had less to do, I think, with the game itself and more to do with like the marketing around the game and the way the publisher EA was looking to make money off of it. And you know, like my experience with playing the game, I really enjoyed it. You know, and I thought it was really cool. Now I don't do a lot of the online elements of it, so maybe that's part of it. But I was really happy with the game, but it was just one of those things where I don't think it ever quite recovered from this controversy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like it's important to note that like this happened within a month of the decision to close Visceral and to change and pivot the development of their Star Wars game. So I think that was like the prequel, the beginning of the downfall here of like public perception, because like the Visceral thing made a decent amount of people mad. And then the microtransaction, which I sort of understand the extent of, but basically, you the way Battlefront 2's online component is designed, like, you know, if you played the game, you know there are tons of things to level up. And you can, you know, as you level up, you also are gaining currency, which allows you to purchase, you know, new hero characters, new vehicles, stuff like that to use in matches. But you also need to play a ton of each kind of like character class and stuff to unlock like all the abilities and level up those abilities. And that can take a really, really long time. And essentially, it seems like the microtransactions were to kind of like speed up that process, because these are like some of the like skills and like abilities that that you can level up and like your character classes can acquire, like make your character like take more damage and do more damage. So it's like, it's not cosmetic stuff, it's stuff that like, you know, you're not going to be able to compete unless you have this stuff in like the online game. So that explains why, you know, if you like log in for the first time, like you're probably going to get demolished in like one hit and not do very much damage to people, because you haven't like leveled up these skills and such. So I think that was where like the microtransactions would sort of support that, and you would be able to acquire some of these skills through randomized loot boxes that you could purchase with real world money to like speed up the process as well. But you also, you know, didn't know if you would get a skill for the class you were playing, which yeah, I think was, I mean, it's a really weird model. It is, I think it benefits people who have tons of free time to play the game. But you know, if not, like, you're not going to have a great experience if you don't have, you know, everything unlocked. But the kind of the counterpoint to this, in like the more consumer friendly part of this, is that and I think it's worth considering that EA and DICE had taken out the paid expansions. All of the game content in Battlefront 2 would now be free, instead of like this like $50 online pass. So that was kind of like, I saw kind of the shadiness behind these microtransactions, but at the time it was really hard for me to be super mad about it because, as I mentioned earlier, with Battlefront 1, I bought the expansion passes, the season pass for 2 consoles. And so like I'd already paid $100 for Battlefront 1 twice to get like the full experience. So to me, like Battlefront 2, I was like, well, I'll just grind this stuff out, and if I have to buy, spend $10 on loot boxes or whatever to, speed it along, like, cool, that's fine compared to what I spent on Battlefront 1. So I was not someone who really saw like this was like the least evil thing that EA had done to Star Wars in in 2017, in my opinion. So like I was not really sweating this, but this somehow is just one of those things where it became like a huge controversy, and there were absolutely pitchforks being wielded, and it made mainstream news. Like I think me and Kevin were sharing posts from like the front page of like CNN. It's like, new Star Wars game is getting your kids to gamble, like all this like kind of hysteric like commentary around it, but it, for better or worse, like it became a big thing, and it was part of the reason why it became a big conversation within the video game industry, and it's part of the reason why we don't really see loot boxes in 2019 games, and you see like a lot of developers like funnily enough BioWare with their new online persistent world game that comes out this month, Anthem, published by EA. They have come out in interviews saying there will be no microtransactions and no loot boxes. Anything you can like buy in the game, you'll know exactly what you're getting, and it's all cosmetic. Like they have gone to great lengths to get that message out there that like, okay, I know who we are, but we're not involved in this stuff. Like, we know how you feel. So it became like this really strange cultural and industry wide touch point.
Yeah, totally. And like you said, I mean, you can still kind of see the effects of it or whatever. I don't think it's necessarily because it was a Star Wars game or because of specifically the way that it was being implemented in that Star Wars game. It was just like a perfect storm of things coming together. And, I guess because it was Star Wars Battlefront, and Star Wars is so well known and all that kind of stuff, it was ripe to be the one maybe that this issue blew up around. But yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it clearly left like a stench on this game that it never recovered from. But also, I think EA and just game developers in general were very wary of having that kind of negative press and have something blow up again because, yeah, it definitely was not good for Battlefront 2. So, yeah, and that's something I'd forgotten about too, Ryan, that you mentioned, the whole thing that was like, well, you're not going to be buying expansions, like DLC expansions for Battlefront 2 like you were with Battlefront 1. So it's kind of like funding the development of more content through microtransactions, which, if you look at it from that perspective, it's not so bad. So yeah, it's a complicated issue, but it's one where the rage from game fans, like gamers or whatever, it definitely boiled over, and it was overall like a big gaffe, I guess, on the part of EA. So
yeah, and so to kind of finish out like the Battlefront 2 saga, in March of 2018, EA quietly announced that microtransactions were coming back into Star Wars Battlefront 2, but they would be cosmetic only. And I don't remember anyone talking about this.
No, not too much, because it was like I bet they didn't make a lot of money on this either, though. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it was probably a super popular thing. I don't know. Maybe, And Battlefront 2 ended up being a popular game, just not as popular as it could have been, I think. So,
Mhm.
Maybe there were enough people playing that were still into it at that time that would have spent some, significant money on cosmetic stuff for that game. But I don't know. I kind of feel like it was probably a pretty minor element of the game and the financial scenario surrounding the game at that point too, which is probably why it didn't make a big splash. And I think their hope for Battlefront 2 was that it would be something that people would be playing constantly for a year or more. And I'm sure, obviously it's got a fan base. There's still people that play it all the time now. But I feel like it didn't really take off the way that they hoped it would. And, I don't know that the pool of people playing the game still in, would you say March? 4 or 5 months after it came out. I don't know how big that pool was compared to what it would have been. And I don't know how invested they were. To be spending a lot of money on cosmetic stuff in that game. But had the game had a more positive reception and story around it when it came out, and those cosmetic microtransactions were available then in December or November or whatever, then I think probably December, whatever it was, I think they probably would have been a lot more successful. But
but I mean, to kind of frame this, it is worth noting that when EA's initial response to the Battlefront 2 microtransactions issue, they posted their initial response on Reddit, and it became the most downvoted Reddit comment of all time.
Yeah.
I'm not like a Reddit person or anything, but you can kind of like see, but I think that's really telling about like where specifically this rage was coming from. And it, that side of the community. And then, I think it's like, it's interesting that, when they, put the microtransactions back into Battlefront 2, people, I don't want to like use like, the outrage culture cliche, but I think people like that group of people, when you think about like how that was such a huge group of people to make it the most downvoted Reddit comment ever, but I guess those people had moved on to being mad about other things at this point. And I don't know if like their energy, because in the meantime, Last Jedi came out, so maybe they were downvoting Last Jedi stuff, or who knows what else. But like people weren't mad anymore, even though like EA went back and like did the thing that they were originally mad about. They like did it, but then it was such a quiet response. And maybe it was because people were just like, I don't care what you do with this game now. Like I've sworn off EA, Star Wars stuff, whatever. Or maybe like it had just moved on to like the next thing to be mad on the internet about.
Yeah, probably a little bit of both, I would say. So,
and I guess like my kind of final statement on Battlefront 2 is it rules. Despite everything, and like obviously from like listening to this the show, like I'm as conflicted about the EA Star Wars situation as anyone, but I absolutely loved the single player component. I love the constant content being released for the game. I still play it. I've put in. I checked my time before we recorded. I checked on Xbox One to see how long I'd played, and I've played over 40 hours of the game. And considering that the single player part is like 5 hours, maybe, that's like 35 hours that I've played in multiplayer. I'm still, right now, I'm still unlocking like the prequel content, the characters, and just kind of like grinding for those those characters. I unlocked General Grievous, and I'm just about to unlock Dooku, and then Obi-Wan is there, and then still coming because they're still supporting this game with new free content is Anakin, like Clone Wars Anakin Skywalker. So I'm really excited, to unlock everyone, and then kind of like I assume that after Anakin, that will probably be like the end of Battlefront 2's free content and the end of the game as we most likely ramp up for a Battlefront 3. But like overall, I think Battlefront 2 is kind of the game that I wished Battlefront 1 was. I think it's overall a great game that has been supported for a really long time for free, and I've gotten a lot of enjoyment out of it.
Yeah, I agree. We have a couple friends who have not played it yet, who I've been trying to convince to buy it for a while now, because like it's so often on sale for $10, or I've seen it for like less than that even. And the amount of content you get with that is crazy. And the way I try to sell it to people is like, for me primarily, I've played a few hours of multiplayer and like arcade stuff, but basically I played the single player story, and that was mostly it. I mean, again, I've played some online. I don't even have like PS Plus to play online right now, so like I haven't played a ton of online, but even just I paid, $60 for the game when it came out, and I felt like it was worth it for that single player storyline and a little bit of arcade and online play. And I thought it was a really good game, if you can get it for $10 or $15, even if all you care about is that single player stuff, it's certainly worth it. If all you care about is online stuff, it's certainly worth it. And yeah, if you're a Star Wars fan and you have a next gen console, or, I guess current gen console at this point, would be the way to refer to it. And you haven't played this game, I think it's crazy not to, because it's so inexpensive most of the time to download from an online, store from Xbox or PlayStation. And it's totally worth checking out. Visually astounding, and there's enough in this game that there's something there for everybody, I feel like, which was not the case with Battlefront 1. But weirdly, it's like this story, or this game, has like a worse reputation and more problems surrounding it, I guess, than the first Battlefront did. And to me, it's like unquestionably the better game of the two, like by far.
Yes.
So it's kind of a bummer that the way they put it out there, and the way they introduced it to the world and everything, kind of, they bungled that. And as a result, what is definitely the better EA Star Wars game, I think the best game they've put out, there's not a lot to choose from, is one that, a lot of people didn't play when they may have otherwise. And anyway, if you haven't played it, you should get it, because it's really cheap and really good at this point. So and there's all that content like you talked about. It's still there, so you're paying $10, $15, $20 even, and getting just a ton of content. So totally worth it.
Yep. And you don't even have to be good at it to unlock stuff. You just have to play.
You just have to go out there and get killed over and over.
Yeah, like I never rise from like the middle of the scoreboards. Like I'm never in the top tier, but I'm never quite in the bottom tier. Usually like mid to bottom area. But like I still, you still get the experience points and credits and stuff so that you can like unlock cool cosmetic stuff. There's amazing solo content with like, young Lando, young Han Solo, that are in there, that look great. And it's like, it's just fun to kind of like, it's like a very old school video game feeling to like kind of just plug away at like trying to unlock characters and stuff. Like it's just cool. It's just like I usually just put on music or a podcast or something and just like go out there and just play. And it's so fun. Cool. So yeah. So that brings us to kind of the end of our episode, and the final thing here, which is, again, a story broke by Jason Schreier at Kotaku on January 15th, 2019. And It reads, Electronic Arts has canceled its open world Star Wars game, according to 3 people familiar with goings on at the company. The game, announced alongside the shutdown of Visceral Games back in 2017, had been in development at EA's office in Vancouver. So this was the game. This was, what we had mentioned earlier when they pivoted the design. Well, that game has been canceled. And the, I guess the sort of silver lining on this, is, and I'll just read right from Jason's article here. When EA's top decision makers looked at their roadmap for the next few years, they decided they needed something earlier than the planned release for Orca, which was the code name for this open world Star Wars game, according to 2 people familiar with what happened. So they canceled Orca in favor of a smaller scale Star Wars project that's now aimed for much sooner, likely late 2020, which also happens to be around the time I've heard next-gen consoles will launch. To EA's credit, those people said the publisher did not lay off anyone as part of this transition. This news comes at a time of cost-cutting across the industry. And some at the studio also hope that Orca may be restarted after this new project is finished.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think one of the big issues, this sucks, because this game was one to look forward to, it seemed like. But then again, like once they kind of got rid of Amy Hennig or she left or whatever they did, and they changed it, changed developers and all that, it was sort of like, what even is this game at this point, And so, I don't know. I think that was the biggest, like the most upsetting thing. It's like, okay, well, Amy Hennig and Visceral aren't making this game anymore. Now we're changing it over to EA Vancouver because we want it to be the kind of game that, is more the kind of game we like to make. And it was like, okay, so it's lost its identity. It's becoming something you think you can monetize better, et cetera. So, I was less excited about it, I guess, once that happened anyway. But still, there was probably a lot there that would have been really cool and, could have been something great. And so hearing that it's canceled is a bummer. But then the idea that like, well, actually we need to put out more games. I mean, that's my biggest issue with the whole EA deal is like they barely put anything out. And, there's not a lot of Star Wars games to play. So if you don't like Battlefront and Battlefront's not really your thing, and there's no Star Wars games coming out, which sucks. So if they're looking to make more games or get something out sooner and have a little more variety in the games they're putting out by making something more quickly that's maybe less ambitious, that could be good too, So I guess, like you said, that's a little bit of a silver lining or whatever there. And then the other silver lining or the other positive thing, which we really haven't talked about at all, but we're running out of time here, is the fact that Respawn's game, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, is hopefully coming out later this year.
Yeah.
And, Respawn, they did Titanfall. You played Titanfall, I'm sure. I haven't, but I think that's supposed to be a pretty fun game, right? And
super fun.
Yeah. So, hopefully that game will be really cool. And the story sounds pretty interesting for Fallen Order. So, and we've talked about that game on the show before anyway. So, like, I guess as we sort of wrap up here, it's like, okay, well, we've got this partnership between EA and Lucasfilm, and EA is going to exclusively make Star Wars games, that starts in 2013 and it's 2019. And we've gotten Battlefront 1 and we've gotten Battlefront 2, and that's it. And Battlefront was pretty good. Battlefront 2, I think, is very good. But, it's pretty much like one Star Wars experience. I mean, Battlefront 1 and 2 are different games, but, one's a sequel, but it's kind of the same thing, just sort of, evolved. So you've gotten, that's it. You know what I mean? And so if we get another game this year and it's not just more Battlefront and it's good, that'll be really cool. And if we can get maybe some other things in addition to that as well, that would be great too. I don't understand why EA doesn't, contract some smaller developers to make some smaller games, like download only games, it's just crazy. Like when The Last Jedi came out and whoever the person was who put together like a little 16-bit, like Kylo and Luke on crate little demo thing, not to be a game for people to play, but just like an aesthetic thing or something to check out. It's like, oh my God, why are we not getting more of this kind of stuff? Like how are we not getting just smaller games in different genres and, a more breadth and variety of games. So I still don't really seem like that's what we're in for. We've got Fallen Order, maybe a Battlefront sequel. It doesn't seem like we're getting a ton of games coming up, but but I don't understand why really. It's like, why do you get this license? This, what must be a really expensive license, and then put out like one game every 1.8 years or whatever, if that, you know what I mean? It seems kind of like a waste.
Yeah. And I mean, there's also just like such a large back catalog of Star Wars games that are not playable on modern devices. There's the, someone is sitting on that like Rogue Squadron collection from Factor 5.
Oh, I think I know who the someone is. I think it's EA.
Like, oh yeah,
they could totally, I'm sure, put that out if they wanted to. They could make that deal and put that out.
Yeah.
In fact, Factor 5, I forget the name of the founder and
Julian something.
Yeah. He almost said as much. Like, it's done. We'd love to put it out. We just need like the powers that be, which we know who that is. That's Lucasfilm. And it's EA. Do you think Lucasfilm would block putting out that game? I don't think so. You know what I mean? I think it's EA looking at it and probably saying, oh, that's not, where are the microtransactions? Like, how do you get people to play it for 14 months at a time? Like, we're not going to bother with that if it's not that,
Yeah. And, on, like, there are some, like, positives. On PS4, you can play, and on Vita, as well, weirdly, you can play Super Star Wars, which is weird. But you can do that. That was released. And then also a few PS2 Star Wars games were released on PS4 back when Sony was like kind of releasing PS2 games on PS4 with like trophies, and they're like upscaled and stuff. And that's pretty cool. Episode 1 Racer for PS2, I think, is fantastic. Jedi Starfighter is pretty good. The Bounty Hunter game, not so good. But then over on the Xbox side, they have recently made a lot of original Xbox games backwards compatible on the Xbox One. Which, if you're playing on a One X, it upscales automatically to 4K, which is really cool. And you can play games like Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Academy, Republic Commando, and I have all those games, and they look fantastic in 4K. Also, I mentioned earlier, Lego Star Wars Complete Collection, and then what else? The Force Unleashed 1 and 2 are backwards compatible on Xbox One, and if you have an Xbox One X, Force Unleashed 1 is upscaled to 4K, and it kind of looks like a modern Star Wars game.
Wow.
Like, that game, I mean, everyone has their opinions on Force Unleashed. I think those games are pretty fun. You can have your opinions on the story, but I think, like, if you want to like experience Star Wars games on modern consoles, like, there are some options now. So
yeah.
Something.
Well, I'll tell you what, if I ever get a 4K TV and need to get a 4K disc player, I think you've just sold me on just getting an Xbox One X as my 4K disc player. I don't think I would go out and buy an Xbox just to be able to play all these old games backwards compatible, especially since I have the majority of them accessible on my PC. But I'm not really playing them on my PC because I don't really play games on my PC. So if I needed to get a 4K disc player, I think that would be the way to do it if you're a Star Wars fan. Especially as as time goes on here, I would think that the price drops are in the future for that console and stuff like that too. So
for sure.
that would be cool. That would be cool for sure. Okay. Well, I think we've got to wrap it up here. Ryan, any final thoughts you want to share on the whole status of? Do you want to see this partnership continue? What's your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I don't think an exclusive partnership for Star Wars is a good choice. Yeah. Like, I think you need partnerships like how, if you can't have LucasArts developing the games internally, like, you need those partnerships with a multitude of developers across the industry. And you need developers for mobile games, you need developers for VR games, you need developers for like Xbox and PlayStation, you need a developer for like Nintendo Switch.
Oh my God. That we didn't even get into that. We got to go, but like that's the biggest travesty of the whole EA deal too. Zero Star Wars games on Switch. Get out of here, EA. Get out of here. What on earth?
Yeah. Totally. No, like you need that. You need Star Wars games for kids. You need Star Wars games for like jaded 30 somethings. Like you need Star Wars games for teens. Like just, like, no, I don't. This was good. And even though like I'm super excited for Jedi Fallen Order, I would like to see what it looks like. At the point, we haven't even seen like a screenshot. I'll believe it when I play it. As far as it coming out in 2019, but I have high hopes for that studio.
Well, my thing is that there's no reason that these EA games couldn't have been made while other developers are making other Star Wars games, except for, EA, I guess, probably wanted, hey, if we're going to invest these resources and stuff into making these games, we don't want any other Star Wars games competing with us. But that was a poor choice on the part of Lucasfilm, I feel like, and I usually try to avoid making statements like that. Like, here I am, just some dork, like on a podcast, like trying to act like I know more about like what kind of deal they should make and, the business side of things than they do. Like, obviously I don't, but at the same time, EA's, it's not like, oh my God, they're such a better developer than everybody else that it's worth giving that up for them to make. It's not worth it. It's like there's so many missed opportunities and missed like games, that could have been made that aren't being made because we gave everything to EA. And I'm not saying I don't want any games from EA, but the exclusivity thing is ridiculous and unnecessary in my uneducated opinion. But I mean, look, here I am, like, I'm representative of the people that want to play Star Wars games, and we're not getting to play them. You know what I mean? No. So whatever you had to sacrifice to give EA this or whatever kind of benefit there is from that, it doesn't outweigh the fact that you're just not serving content to fans. And you think about like the publishing world, there's so many Star Wars books coming out, comics, all that stuff. Like, there's so much. And then in terms of games, which really could be a huge thing for Star Wars, there's like practically nothing. And so, it's just kind of crazy.
Yep.
Okay. We got to wrap it here. So I'm sure we'll be talking about Star Wars games in the future here on the show. And we'll be back very soon with our next episode. Until then, you could reach us at blockaderunnerpodcast@gmail.com if you have thoughts on Star Wars and games, if you have thoughts on Star Wars in general, or you just want to give us feedback on the show. Definitely can reach us there, as the Rural Farm Boy did. So we'll look forward to hearing from you. Check out anything we do at blockaderunnerpodcast.com. You can follow the show on Twitter at Blockade Run. Ryan, you are on Twitter
at Brawn Dwarf, BRAWNDWARF.
All right. And any other links you can find there at blockaderunnerpodcast.com. And we'd love to see you subscribe on iTunes or your podcast service of choice. And, if you watch the show or are interested in any of the other videos we put up, we're on YouTube and you can subscribe there as well. So I think that's going to do it for today. Thanks very much for watching and or listening. And we'll be back soon with more Blockade Runner Podcast.